A long time.
Yeah. I can only imagine how difficult it was before the internet. Having to make all those phone calls, making all those trips if you really want to know. And then email made it easier though, so that's one thing. Has everybody been building a family tree? Yeah.
We've outlasted the software.
Yeah. So did my dad.
Do you know how to transfer it from Family Tree Makers?
From Family Tree Maker, that's what my dad used also, but I don't think he's ever tried to transfer it.
Yeah.
I never used it because by the time I was interested, you didn't have to use Family Tree Maker anymore.
Yeah.
That's a good question though, and maybe I'll find an answer for you soon. Not today, but
yeah,
I could probably find an answer pretty soon.
Well,
we don't have it in Family Tree.
It's not on Tree Maker? Where is it?
It's in an Apple program, an iMac program that doesn't do half of what
Family Tree Maker used to.
In the same way anyway.
Yeah.
For us.
So Family Tree Maker is good. I mean, well, I know it's good, but
yeah,
we don't even have it.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Well, I guess it's 7 o'clock, so I will get started. Some of you already know me, but for those who don't, my name is Trevor Dotson, and I am the manager of operations at the Charlevoix Historical Site right down the street. And a little bit of background on me and my genealogy research. As I kind of just mentioned, my dad started doing some genealogy research really before the internet was useful for it, or if it, he probably started in the mid-90s. And he was interested because his father did not know who his grandfather was. So that kind of got the ball rolling on. He was trying to figure out for his dad who his grandfather was. And we took some family trips down to different places in the United States to do some ancestry research. And at the time, I was just going along because it was a vacation. Fast forward all the way up to about 2010 or 2011, I started to get more and more interested in history in general, just American history in general. And then from that, I realized like, well, if I like history so much, why don't I research my own history, my own family history? So that's when I started my journey into doing more genealogy research around 2010, 2011, and which was good because by that time, sites like Ancestry were already up and running and getting all the bugs out and well established. So that's my little background on genealogy, my genealogy research. And I probably, like many of you, go down the rabbit hole, and before you know it, it's 9 o'clock, and then all of a sudden it's like 2 in the morning, and you're like, why am I still up? So fun stuff, right? That's what we do. All right, so my presentation will be on local genealogy resources, but it will also cover some things that can help you if you don't have ancestors that live in the northern Michigan area. But it generally kind of focuses on the northern Michigan, kind of western northern Michigan region. So the first step one should take when deciding to research your ancestors is to gather what you already know about your family. Collect the family records, old photos, letters, diaries, family Bibles, newspaper clippings, and anything that you may already have. And you can ask other family members if they have things as well. Second, you should talk to your relatives, and don't just ask them the facts and the dates. Get stories of their childhood, their early adulthood, and the ancestors that they remember and what they were like. And try to phrase questions with things like why, how, and what. That's a good way to get your research rolling, and it'll also help future researchers if any of your children or grandchildren are interested. So what we will discuss today, here's a little rundown. We'll start with obituaries, death certificates, and cemetery records. Then we'll move to newspapers, state census records, books and plat maps, some free websites, and genealogy on YouTube. So, sorry, I'm gonna have to keep reaching down to do this. There we go. To begin, we are going to discuss obituaries, which can be a wealth of information. If you have ancestors in the Charlevoix area, you are fortunate the library has already had volunteers who have done most of the legwork for you because they have researched and digitized obituaries from the local newspapers. So to get to them, you can just go to the Charlevoix Library's website, hit the history tab, and then the obituaries are underneath the history tab. And then from there, you will come to this landing page, and you see that you have some choices of what to put in for search methods. What I generally like to do, so the drop-down menu says contains, starts with, equals, more than, or less than. I'm not really sure how useful these ones would be, but generally what I like to do if I'm doing this is I just put the surname in. I don't even put a first name in. So starting off with that, you're gonna get a list such as this. So I put the name O'Brien in, and instead of putting in a first name, I'm just gonna get the list of all the O'Briens that they have in there, and then I can just look down the list if I want to, or alphabetize the list, or if I know the date of death, I could sort it by date of death, but I can look down the list and see which O'Briens I want to look at. And sometimes they also list the spouse as well, which is very helpful because if you don't know the spouse, maybe he or she's already there right off the bat. And they'll give the maiden name sometimes, Mary Jane Underwood. And actually that's the person that I put the obituary up for. So once you have the list, you can click on the little link right here. It'll take you to another landing page that will have some other information. And then that page has another link that will take you to the obituary. And the obituary pretty much looks exactly like what it did in the newspaper. Has anybody used this before? Yeah. So obviously obituaries have lots of information in them. So let's see. So the information you can find in an obituary, you have obviously the date of death, sometimes the cause of death. You usually have a date of birth and the location of the birth. You usually have when the individual moved from place to place, that's often mentioned. It'll list family members, both ones who have already have been deceased and ones that are still living. They sometimes give military service, careers, public service, hobbies, and burial locations. So this one is for one of my wife's ancestors right here, Albert O'Brien. And then this one over here is for a wife of one of his brothers, since I didn't find one for his wife. And there's a picture of 6 of the O'Brien men. One of these men is Albert, but I don't know which one. So there's a thing. You need to write the names of the people on the back of the photos if you know them, because that will help people in the future. Because if you have a picture of 6 individuals who are all brothers, and you don't have another photo of them, it's going to be hard to determine which of the 6 is Albert, in my case. So always write the names on the back of photos if you know them. Maybe write the location where the photo was taken if you know, and the date. So moving on with obituaries, another good resource to find obituaries is Greenwood Cemetery's website. So Greenwood Cemetery is in Petoskey, Michigan, and they have a really great website to do genealogy research. So you can hit the research tab on their homepage, and you can see they have obituaries and burials, newspapers, photo archives, and area histories. So for this one, I use the example of the McSaba family. There's lots of McSabas in the area. I was looking for Chief Louis McSaba, for whom the McSaba area here in Charlevoix is named after. And because I already knew that there was lots of various spellings of the last name McSaba, I didn't even put the full surname into the search function. I only put MCSA, and that way I got a list of lots of different McSabas or McSabis, and there are at least 6 different spellings of the last name right here. And if you do it another way and put it MACSA, you're going to get other various spellings of that last name. So whenever you're searching, sometimes you don't even have to put a lot in. You can just put partial things in, and you're going to get search results on certain websites will do things like this. The technology is so good, it'll filter things out. So we have at least 6 different spellings of McSaba, but I found the person I was looking for, Louis McSaba, and this is a short obituary. There's other obituaries for him out there. This is just one that shows up on this website.
So the Greenwood Cemetery is in Petoskey, but it actually has combined all of these other cemetery records.
So they have, the Greenwood Cemetery is a humongous newspaper archive, which I'll get to later. And I'm guessing that they're taking obituaries from that as well. So they'll have obituaries made from Sheboygan, Mackinac, things like that. It just depends on whatever somebody's been able to get into the system. They are not just focusing on their cemetery alone. So McSaba was actually buried, if I recall correctly. He is in East Jordan. His burial's somewhere in East Jordan, if I recall.
It says Harbor Springs on the.
Oh, does it say Harbor Springs? There you go. See, I didn't even read it. So he died in East Jordan. His burial's in Harbor Springs, according to this one. So they're covering a large area. So moving on, there's a website called Michiganology.org. And Michiganology.org is useful for death certificates and Michigan state censuses. So if you're having problems finding some death certificates for anybody here in Michigan, and you don't want to use a website that you have to pay to access these things, this could be a good site to use. There's a search feature right over here on the home page. You hit the research button, and you'll get this list right here. And then from this list, you can just select what you want to search for. So for death certificates, they have them from 1897 to 1952, as you see. And again, I did not fill the whole thing out. I just wanted to put in some information to get started. So I'm looking for Horace Harsha, for whom the museum here in Charlevoix is named after him and his family. So I put in Horace Harsha, Charlevoix County. And I wasn't exactly sure, even though I should probably know, I wasn't sure when he died. So I put in an approximate date range. I left the age of the deceased blank because I figured if I had it wrong, it might not give me the result I want. And I left these blank because I figured I didn't really need that information to get going. But you can always fill it in later if you're not having success. So then after filling that out, I got his death certificate. You can blow it up right on the screen on this website. You can make it as large as you can almost. You can download it. You can save it to your computer. It's free. It doesn't have any watermarks or anything. And obviously from death certificates, we get a lot of great information. Maybe you didn't know who his father was or who the mother was. Maybe you knew who they were, but you didn't know where they were born. And this information is listed. It'll list the date of death, how the person died, something that's very important, where the person is buried, because sometimes we don't know that information. And if one family member is buried somewhere, it's possible others are too. But the one thing that I want to point out about death certificates are generally the information on part of the death certificate is only as good as the person who is the informant for the death certificate. So I've had lots of instances where the informant must have been mistaken because they had facts wrong. So the mother's maiden name is wrong because the informant got the wrong name. So this informant was John W. Harsha, who was Horace's son. So I would hope that John had good information to provide. But sometimes what if the informant happened to be a nephew, and the nephew is kind of far removed from the information, and he could only give what he thought was correct. And you have to fact check to make sure these things are correct by finding secondary sources. All right, so Charlevoix County's website, charlevoixcounty.org, they also allow you to search for death records and marriage records. It's a very kind of basic site and basic search, but this is what the general landing page will look like. And as you can see, you can only put in a last name, a first name, and then the year range. So this one, you are actually only allowed to put in a small amount of information. So for this one, I again tried to search for Horace Harsha, but I just put Harsha in. I didn't even put his first name. I just want to see how many would come up. So Horace did show up, and his wife, Margaret, whose real name is actually Marguerite, so they may have gotten that wrong. But it does have Horace's middle name, which is correct. And then it provides the date of death for both of them and the location that they died. This site doesn't really provide anything else other than that, but it has been helpful every once in a while, and it does have some marriage records too. And even though there's some drop-down menus, and even though the drop-down menu starts in 1901, it has records from the 19th century. So I don't really know why the drop-down menu starts at 1901. And maybe if you needed to get some more information, you could always contact the county clerk, because if they have a record online, they probably have a tangible record somewhere. So you could always contact the county clerk. So another great free website, which I'm sure some of you have probably used, is Find a Grave. So Find a Grave is a free site right now. It was unfortunately purchased, or maybe fortunately, I don't know. It was purchased by Ancestry.com, and that kind of makes me a little worried that eventually it'll be behind a paywall. But for now, it's free. And Find a Grave is obviously run by people like you and me. So it's all kind of researcher driven. Somebody is researching somebody in a cemetery, they can put a request out to you or you to go to Brookside Cemetery and take a picture of a headstone for them and then upload it to the website. So it's all just research driven. And because of that, you have to make sure that if you're using this as a resource, that you find secondary sources to make sure that this information is factual. But sometimes it's a great resource, because right here for Albert Eugene Mason, it's like one-stop shopping here. We get a photo of him, we get a photo of his or his tombstone or his gravestone, and we also get his obituary all in one place. We're getting some of his siblings, his children, his parents, his spouse, all in one place. But like I said, you should always try and make sure you find some secondary sources to make sure this information is correct, because anybody could put this up. I could put this up, and I may have something wrong. So always make sure if you're using things like Find a Grave, you're finding second sources. Okay. So moving on, the Charlevoix Historical Society actually has the Brookside Cemetery list of burials from 1907 or from 1906 all the way to 1997, and it's not complete. You know, we don't have all of 1906 or all of 1997, but it's a pretty lengthy book with some good details in it. So the book records names, date of death, age, race, sex, occupation, place of birth, the residence of where the person passed away. So like basically if they passed away in Eveline Township or Norwood Township, for instance. The location where they are buried within the cemetery, and it gives the lot and the block numbers and kind of like a little bit more information about where they're at. And this can be helpful because we have this little hand-drawn map of the cemetery. So if somebody was buried, let's say in lot 23 or block 15, lot 23, we would know that we have to look right here, somewhere in that area. And then there's some that are alphabetized over here. And then there's the Grand Arm of the Republic section right here as well. So this is very helpful if you have anybody that you've been looking for in Brookside Cemetery. So now I'll talk a little bit about state census records. I'm not going to cover federal census records because those are a broad thing and we could talk about those for a while. But state census records, I think, is something sometimes people overlook. So many states would take their own census, and those often occurred on years that were not the federal census. So the federal census was going every 10 years. It was going 1870, 1880, and so on and so forth. And sometimes states did them on off years. So for Michigan, for instance, we have Michigan censuses for 1827, 1845, 1854, 1857, 1864, 1874, 1888, and 1894. In this presentation, I already said that. So unfortunately, though, as you can see from this list, the counties in this region, such as Charlevoix, Antrim, Emmett, Otsego, Grand Traverse, Kalkaska, and Sheboygan, are not part of this collection. But if you're researching anybody who moved from one state to Michigan and then moved in Michigan up to here, you may be able to find them. Let's say they were in Washtenaw County. Washtenaw County has a good amount, so you may have some success right there. And these state censuses may have some information that some of the federal censuses do not have. Particularly of note, the 1890 federal census basically does not exist because it burned in a fire. So a lot of genealogists have this issue where they have this big 20-year gap from 1880 to 1890 where their ancestors could have moved anywhere. And without that 1890 census, you know, it makes it difficult. Let's say you had a child who was born in 1887, but then died in 1897. They will never show up on a federal census because the 1890 census burned. So that's where things like the 1894 state census could come in handy here. But like I said, unfortunately, none of the counties in this area are on this list, but it'll be helpful if you have other relatives in Michigan or ancestors in Michigan. And this is on michiganology.org as well.
Trevor, just a curiosity, the different every 10 years, why were those censuses done by the state, you know?
I don't really know why the state did them. A lot of states did do censuses. I guess it was just maybe for their own record keeping too. Like, I'm sure, like, obviously the states want to get federal funding, so there was probably some reason to keep track of your population through a census to get federal funding. I'm not sure. It's probably all about money and keeping track, I guess. So here's an example of an 1894 census, but this is just the top part because I couldn't fit all of it on the screen because it would keep going like off the screen. But the 1894 Michigan census does have a lot of information that your federal census would have. I think I have a list here somewhere. Yeah. So the 1884 Michigan census and the 1894 census have all your usual things: name, age, race, relationship to the head of the household, your marital status, the month that you got married and the place that you got married, your place of birth, your parents' place of birth, children born to the family during that census year, your occupation, your health status, your education, the number of years you've been living in Michigan, and the number of years living in the United States. So don't overlook state censuses. They can be helpful. All right, so moving on, we're going to now go to newspapers and how we can use those. So the Charlevoix Public Library is awesome, and they digitized almost every single copy of the Charlevoix Sentinel, the Charlevoix Journal, and the Charlevoix Courier they had by using a company. I'm not sure if the Internet Archive is the one that did it, but they're all uploaded to a website called the Internet Archive. And you can easily get to it by just going to the Charlevoix Public Library's website, hitting that research tab on the home page, and you'll see newspapers. And you click on that, it takes you to this Internet Archive page. And you can use this box over here to sort through. So the collection starts in 1869. That was the first issue of the Charlevoix Sentinel, and it goes up to around 2016, 2017. And then you can use these arrows to refine your search. So if you want 1869 to 1910, you can do that. You can use this as well to do that if you want to just pull out certain things like from 1 year, from 1927. You can use this to just show the newspapers because there's other things on here as well. So there's a lot of little filters you can use. Got to play around with it a little bit. This one over here, you can change the view. So this one, I have it in a list view, just a simple list. There's other views where you can look at like kind of thumbnails of them and stuff. So here's what it'll look like if you pull up one of the papers. I pulled up 1930, but you have to be careful. One thing to note is when you pull up a set of papers, make sure the date is what you're looking for. So this goes from September 3rd, 1930 to December 6th, 1933. So they kind of have these weird things. It must have been the way they were scanning them. It's not like they just scanned like all of 1930 in one set. So you kind of have to make sure the set that you're looking for is what you want. You can use this right here to make the screen as large as possible. And these zoom in and zoom out right here to make it easy to read. And then the best part is the search magnifying glass up here. So you can do searches. You don't even have to read the paper like line by line. You can use this to try and search first. And it's not 100%, but it has been very helpful. So by using that little magnifying glass, you get a little window like this, and then you can type in a search term that you want. I went back to the O'Brien family, so I'm searching for James O'Brien, and here's my results. And it highlights each time James O'Brien showed up. And then from there, there's also they're really hard to see, but there's little things that show up down here too. But from there, you can just click this, or click this one, or click this one, and it'll take you directly to the page. It might not highlight it as much as I just did here, but it'll take you to the page, and then you only have to look on that page for where it's kind of highlighted in blue. And if you're searching for more than one word, how I'm searching for James O'Brien, or if you're searching for the vessel Fountain City, or if you're searching for the hotel Fountain City House, or if you're searching for a group like the Knights of Pythias, you want to put them in quotation marks. Because if you don't put all the words in quotation marks, it's going to pull out every single time Knight shows up, every single time Fountain shows up. So you don't want to have a search result that has a whole bunch of fountains, a whole bunch of cities. You just want Fountain City House. So that's generally how that works. You hit the little magnifying glass, you put in your search term. If it's more than one word, you put it in quotes. And then it'll take you to the page when you click the little link right there. And then here's the O'Brien brothers again. I brought them back up. This was a cool article that we found. So 6 Western Michigan brothers claim longevity record, ages total 450 years. So all 6 of them right here were 70 or older at the time of this article, which I believe is from 1927. But I'm not following along with my notes now. 1929. So another thing to note is that when you're searching for a female, females often are listed as their spouse's name. So for E.H. Green, which is Edward Green, for a female, you might want, for his wife, you might want to search Mrs. E.H. Green or Mrs. Edward Green, because married women were hardly ever listed by their first name in the newspaper. And that's going all the way into the 70s, like the 1970s. You know, there's so many times I was looking for Irene Young, the wife of Earl Young, and I had to type in Miss Earl Young, or Mrs. Earl Young, or Mrs. Earl A. Young. And I got more results with that than searching for Irene Young. And even when searching for men, you got to try lots of different ways. You can try Edward Green, Edward H. Green, E.H. Green, which is what he seemed to like to go by. Major Green, because he was a major in the war. Sometimes he shows up like that. The Honorable Green, or for instance, other names are sometimes shortened. So going back to the O'Briens, sometimes George O'Brien shows up as GEO period O'Brien, and Charles Allard shows up as CHS period Allard. It's just they like to abbreviate things. William Cooper shows up a lot as WM period Cooper. So don't just search William Cooper. Try different things. Unfortunately, if you have a name like Cooper and you're searching in old newspapers, you can't just put Cooper in, because then you're going to get things that deal with being a Cooper. Or if your last name is Farmer, you're going to get things, anytime Farmer comes up, you're going to get just things about being a farmer. Or if your last name is White, anytime the word white shows up. So sometimes if you have names like that, you have to do some certain searches. So here's some examples of things that you can find in the newspaper. You can find articles. Well, first of all, you can find articles about your family members, but you can also find advertisements. So here's an advertisement for William C. Newman's dry goods store. So if you know that your ancestor owns a business, this might be helpful. And here on this one, we see that Charlie Newman is opening, it's kind of hard to read, but he's opening an ice cream saloon. And then his brother, Harry, or Henry Newman, as he sometimes went by, is starting a bakery on Bridge Street. So they're a little hard to read, but the newspapers have a lot of information you can glean from them. And we also have at the Charlevoix Historical Society, you can't search this online, But I can search it for you at the museum, or we can do it real quick together. The former director of the historical site, Betsy Reynolds, she loved to transcribe things from the newspaper. Like, she must have transcribed so much stuff. And she went through the newspapers, and anything that she thought was interesting business related, from the earliest newspapers, from 1869 going into the 1900s, she was transcribing things. So this is some of her transcriptions. And because it's a Word document, I can just type in a last name or a search term and just see if it comes up in the document. And she has them sorted by year too. So it'll be like 1869 business, 1870 business. She transcribed a lot of stuff, and it's very useful, actually. So moving on, you can also find newspapers at Greenwood Cemetery, like I mentioned. And Greenwood Cemetery has more than just Charlevoix. Greenwood Cemetery has basically the entire northern Michigan region. So they have things over in Sheboygan, Mackinac. They might even have a little bit in going into the UP, Iosco County, maybe, Alcona County. They have a lot of stuff. I haven't even looked through it all. But to look through theirs, it's kind of the same deal. You have your search box, and because I'm searching for more than one word, I'm searching a name, I put in quotation marks again. You can select what newspaper you want to choose. So if you know that you're only going to want to look for something from Sheboygan, let's say the Sheboygan Daily, if that exists, then you would choose that newspaper. You can choose the month that you're looking for if you really know what you're looking for, and you can choose a year. So for this example, I chose Grace Jessup, who is a suffragette and a teacher in Petoskey. And I did not select a newspaper because I just wanted to see how many she would show up in. I didn't bother select a month because I'm not searching for anything particular. But I searched for 1920, but I left the last digit blank because I found on this website you can leave the last digit blank and it'll find everything from 1920 to 1929 for you. So that way you don't even have to do it 1920, 1921, 1922. If you just leave the last digit blank, it usually finds things throughout the whole decade. So this is what the result page will look like. So here's the paper that it's in, the page that it's on. I know it's a little hard to read, but it says Petoskey Evening News, page 3. Here's the date, 6/19/1920. And then here's a little highlight section that shows that Grace Jessup is indeed in this article. And then if you move forward, you unfortunately on this website have a page that looks like this. And it'll be very hard to tell, but it is highlight right here. But on this website, you're gonna have to read through a little bit. There is a way to do a search method. If you open it up in like an Adobe Acrobat reader, or sometimes this opens it up in a certain Adobe type Acrobat reader or a PDF viewer, there is a search function on PDF viewers, which I can talk to people about if they are interested. But if you zoom in, you can see Jessup was actually highlighted before I even tried to search for it. But on this website, when you click on the paper, you might have to just read through the columns to find it. But at least you only have one page to look through. And then moving on, another useful newspaper website is Chronicling America, which is at the Library of Congress. So the Library of Congress has lots of digitized newspapers, not just from Michigan, from all over the country. And they even have ones in other languages too. I found some of my ancestors in the German newspapers in Detroit, which I don't know how to read. So finding those was fun because then I got to transcribe them. But so on the Library of Congress's Chronicling America, you can do a whole bunch of nice search features as well. They have the advanced search. You can choose a state. And then here I chose the Charlevoix County Herald. So the Charlevoix County Herald is out of East Jordan. And then you can also choose a date range. And you have a bunch of different search methods right down here. I like to use the one that says with the words within X amount of spaces. So if I was searching for the Charlevoix Historical Society, you could just type it in here, and Charlevoix Historical Society, those words have to appear within 5 words of each other to get a result, for instance. So like I said, the Charlevoix County Herald is on this website. The site has 872 issues of the Charlevoix County Herald between February 1904 and September 1921. And then here's what a result page would look like. I don't even remember what I searched for. Oh, well, I guess I didn't put in what did I search for? I think I searched for general store. So I believe I searched for general store, and these are the results. You'll see them highlighted in red. So anytime general store showed up, those two words showed up within 5 spaces of each other, or 5 words, you get a result. So here's a close-up view. So he converted this into a general store and conducted business for years. So I just did a search for general store as an example. So you can click on any of those previous ones. Let's say it was this one. And when you click on it, it can get bigger, and you can zoom in, and you can download these as well. So if you find something, you can download it to your computer. So moving on, this is a great resource from the Clark Historical Library at CMU. This is the Digital Michigan Newspaper Portal, and what this site will do for you is it lists all the available newspapers that they know of that have been digitized by county. So here's an example of the ones for Charlevoix. They will list they list whether you can view them for free or whether you have to pay for them. This says every single one of them available in Charlevoix is free. And then you can click on one of these to get a link to where you might be able to find them. In the Grand Traverse County, I put that over here because one of them is a pay one. So I just want to show this one, the Traverse City Record Eagle, is behind a paywall.
Surprise.
Yeah, yeah. The one that's been around there the longest and has the most articles is behind the paywall. And I know I keep talking about newspapers, but they're very helpful. And this will be real quick. Google also has a newspaper database. So there's the link right there. It's also in the handout. But the Google newspaper database, for as much money as Google has, like I feel like it's kind of hard to use this one. But you can just put search terms up in the search thing and see if anything shows up. And I do get results quite frequently. But this one's a little bit difficult for me to work with, but it has lots of papers. You can view them just like any of the other websites. And Google also has a book search feature where you can search lots of old books that Google or other companies have scanned. So I just did a quick one for Horace Harsha, and I found Horace Harsha's name in a book that I would not have guessed he would be in. And they also had him in a book where he was part of a litigation here in Charlevoix. They just randomly show up. People have scanned and digitized these books, and they're very helpful. And in the Google book one, it's not even just old books. They have books that are like more modern as well. So moving on, we'll now talk a little bit about books that the Historical Society has, and this will go by pretty quick. And we'll also talk a little bit about plat maps. So the first book is a really cool book called The Traverse Region. And the Traverse Region was copywritten in 1884, and it contains the historic descriptions of 9 counties and has portraits and biographical sketches of the prominent men and pioneer families. So the counties that are covered in this book are Antrim, Benzie, Charlevoix, Sheboygan, Emmett, Grand Traverse, Kalkaska, Leelanau, and Wexford. So here's an example of one of the biographical sketches out of this book. And this one's kind of a short one, but this is of John Nichols, who was the owner of the Charlevoix Lumber Company back in the day. So if you have ancestors that were in any of the counties in this region and they were here and they were prominent figures, they may be named in this book. And also, this book is a good resource just to learn more about the area. They have a great history of Charlevoix, of Ironton, Petoskey. This book can also be found on U of M's digital collections. So that book that I was just talking about can be found on U of M's digital collection here. And this is Michigan County Histories and Atlases. So this is useful if you have any ancestors wherever in Michigan. And again, you can just type some simple search terms in here, or you can use the advanced search field, which I won't get into. But I'll show you, I did a quick search on this website for D.C. Nettleton, who was a prominent guy here in Charlevoix. And this is the results that we get. So we have some highlight sections that show D.C. Nettleton shows up on this plat map, shows up on this plat map, shows up on this one, but he also shows up in some histories as well. So if you click on one of these, you might have to do a little bit of looking through it to find D.C. Nettleton, but on the one particular one I clicked on, It's showing that DC Nelton owns this property here in Charlevoix Township in 1901, amongst other properties that he owned. But not only does it show that he owned that, but he's also listed in the directory as being the deputy county supervisor. So the 1901 plat book has a list of some men who paid to have their names put in the back. So if you were a farmer or a business owner or an official, you could pay to have your name put in the back of this 1901 plat book. And by the way, we sell the 1901 plat book at the museum if anybody wants a hard copy of it, but it's also available on the library's website. You can view it for free there as well. So speaking of plat maps, I'm a guy who really likes maps. So plat maps are basically maps that show who owns what land. And the Charlevoix Historical Society has the 1901 map. We have a 1930, and then from 1930, we're missing a bunch of years again. We go to about 56, 65, 67. Those are some of the years that we have. So on this one, I went with the O'Brien family again, and I searched for James O'Brien, and we have a J. O'Brien here in Norwood, and another one right here, and then another O'Brien family member over here. And then in Hayes Township, I found Albert O'Brien, my wife's ancestor right here, and another family member right here. And then when I was searching, I was also doing this for another thing. I was looking for the Harwoods. So here's one of the Harwood family members for whom the lake is named after. And then here's one of the Parson family members right here. So you can find a lot of information from plat maps. Some of the things that you can find exactly where your ancestor lived or where they owned property. The small black dots that you might be able to see, these little small black dots usually indicate where the house was located. So Jeanette right here, for whom Jeanette Road is named after, I would assume, their house was probably located right there. You can see how much property they owned in a certain area, their property's relationship to the towns, schools, post offices, mills, roads, and water resources. You can see who their neighbors were. Family members can often be found nearby as well. So here's Albert O'Brien, and just right across the road is a family member right there. So if you're looking for one side of the family and you can't find them, but you know where another side of the family lived, maybe a map like this might help. You can also know when property was sold, because if you had plat maps that were of consecutive years, you could see if the property changed hands because the name is going to be different, or when property got subdivided more, when it got smaller. Another thing to think about is if you cannot find a family member in a census record, but you're like certain that they live in a certain area, you could always go to a map and see if they show up on the map. So this is 1901, of course. Let's say you can't find your ancestor in the 1900 census. Why is that? Maybe their name was transcribed really, really bad, and you just can't find them, but you're positive they lived in Norwood Township. You could go to a map like this and maybe find them on it. And also, by knowing who their neighbors are, you could search for their neighbors in the 1900 census, and maybe when the neighbor's name pops up, somewhere on that sheet you might find your ancestor's name, and then you can see it's really spelled poorly because you didn't find it originally. So some things to think about, some different ways to look for things. If you can't find your family member in a census, but you know who one of their neighbors were, maybe search for the neighbor. So moving on, this part we'll go through pretty quick. The Historical Society and Library have a collection of local and regional history books that could be of an invaluable source for your genealogy research. Here we have The Way It Happened, which covers some of the history of the Little Traverse Bay Band, and a book that just came out, A Cloud Over the Land, which covers the story of the Burt Lake Band of Ottawa and Chippewa over in Sheboygan County. And we also have A Pictorial History of East Jordan, East Jordan Remembers. This book has everything listed in the table of contents by topic, and I had somebody from another state come and find like some of their Czech family members in this book, which was pretty cool. So we have How It Was in Horton Bay, Settlers to Sidewalks for Boyne City, Norwood, A Legacy of Northwoods Living by Nancy Ritzma, and For Old Time's Sake, which is another book about Norwood, which I found a lot of information about my wife's family in, which was pretty cool. We have Pioneer Notes, which covers mostly the area kind of like Norwood South going into Banks Township and Atwood and things like that. And the great thing about this book is this one has an index, which is awesome because a lot of the other books don't have an index, but this one does. So if you have a surname you want to look up or a person you want to look up, it's nice and easy to use. And it has an index by topics too. And I've used this book, and I've had a few other people come in and use this book. And then this book right here is Breath Escaping Envelopes, which has some copies of people's letters and remembrances, stories, things like that. And this kind of covers Banks Township a little bit too. We also have the Journal of Beaver Island. We have volumes 1 through 5. We have a Beaver Island scrapbook. So we cover the region pretty well. And another thing to think about, if you don't have a picture of one of your ancestors from when they were a youth or from when they were a young adult, you could always go to the yearbooks. So the Charlevoix Historical Society and the library have a pretty good collection of Charlevoix yearbooks. The ones here at the library are behind glass, so you're going to have to get one of the librarians to open it for you. But both of us have a good collection of yearbooks. The earliest one that I think the Historical Society has goes back to about 1910, and roughly 1920s for the library, I believe. But I think this could be a good resource if you don't have an early photo of one of your ancestors. You could check one of these, and plus you might find out interesting things about them. Maybe they were in band, maybe they were in debate club, and you didn't know that. So here we have an entire class of 1939 photo. You know, maybe you found your ancestor in one of the athletic photos or one of the band photos. I think I had one other thing I wanted to say about the yearbooks. Let me check. Oh yeah, the other thing I was going to mention is that you don't even have to stop by the library or the museum to look at a lot of them because the library did the work for you and digitized them again. So if you go back to that same library homepage and hit the research tab where the newspaper link was, it's also the yearbooks. So that's where it comes down to over here. You want to filter out all the newspapers. You can filter out the newspapers and just get the yearbooks. So 68 yearbooks have been digitized. The earliest one on here that's been digitized is 1924. Then it jumps all the way to 1945, 46 year. And then it goes kind of sporadic, like we're missing years here, missing years there, missing years here. And it goes up to around 2017. But I will note that the library has some yearbooks that we don't have at the Historical Society, and we have some that they don't have. So you might want to call if one of them doesn't have what you're looking for. All right, so moving on, a couple other things. The Historical Society has a collection of files on Charlevoix Civil War, Spanish-American War, and World War I veterans that were researched and compiled by former director Betsy Reynolds. So like I said, she liked to transcribe things. She has transcribed a bunch of information about Spanish-American War, Civil War, and World War I veterans that can be viewed at the museum. The library has the complete collection of the War of the Rebellion, official records of the Union and Confederate armies that you can use here. They also have a book called Michigan Soldiers and Sailors, the Alphabetical Index. So if you had any Michigan soldier or sailor from the Civil War, they could be possibly listed in that book here at the library in the Michigan room. The Historical Society also has Who is Who in Company K, which was the Michigan Sharpshooters Unit, which consisted mostly of Native Americans. And as you can see over here, the person did a great job of, again, this person named Albert Pechurbe had multiple different last name spellings and documents that he was researching. And he listed all the different spellings that he found. And he did that for anybody who he researched for this book, which was excellent. We also have these two books, Charlevoix's Contribution to World War I and World War II. We have them at the museum and at the library. And they have an index in the back, so you can easily search for your ancestor by last name. And moving on, another helpful thing that the Charlevoix Historical Society has are all these telephone directories. So the telephone directories are great because if you don't know exactly where your ancestor lived, we can look it up real quick. We can just look for them by last name, and maybe we find them on Hurlbut Street, or maybe we find them on Upright Street. Maybe we find them out in Eveline Township on Rural Route 3. So these are pretty useful. And again, if you can't find your ancestor on a census, but you know a neighbor who may live next to them, maybe we can figure it out through one of these as well. I use the telephone directories quite frequently. Yeah, the information that you can get on them, you find out neighbors, approximate time frame from when an ancestor lived in a certain location if they moved. You can also find out from these whether one of your ancestors owned a business. If you didn't know if they, let's say you just came about the fact that they owned a business. So if you know that your ancestor owned a business, I would recommend that you check with your town or with the town's city historical site or museum or library to see if they have a photo of the said business, because your ancestor may be in the photo of the building. And that could be the only photo you ever find of your ancestor. So that's a recommendation also. If you find out that they were like a butcher and they owned a butcher shop, check with that city or town's historical site. Maybe they have a photo of the butcher shop and your family member could be standing outside. So here we have Charles Roland Bellinger family, circa 1900. We have the whole family right in the doorway there. And then for some reason, one kid is standing over here by himself. Maybe that was the cousin they didn't like, I don't know. And then we have Bert and Amy, I shouldn't have picked them because I don't know how to say the last name, Baudon, circa 1906 outside of their ice cream parlor. And then we have the Cornelius Geiken family outside of their gift shop in 1956. So if you're struggling to find a photo of an ancestor and they own a business, maybe check around. And one of the final things we'll get to, oral histories. The Charlevoix Historical Society has lots of oral histories that were done mainly in the 1970s and 80s. And they're unfortunately on cassette tape, which we're trying to transfer over to a digital file. But we do have some oral histories on tape if anybody has some topics that they would like to come see if we have. In the Charlevoix Public Library used to do Charlevoix oral traditions, and they have uploaded lots of those to their YouTube page. So if you go to YouTube and type in Charlevoix Public Library, you can find these videos there. I've used those a couple times. And they also have them on DVD, correct? Yeah, there's some on DVD you can take home. Can they take them home? Okay, you can take home the DVD copies too. And then to cover a few free websites, if you're tired of trying to pay an arm and a leg for Ancestry or other paywall websites. So Family Search is a great free website. All you have to do on Family Search is just make an account. It's free. You just have to make a username and a password. And Family Search has pretty much a lot of the things that you would need to get started. They have censuses. They have birth records, death records, marriage records, all the big stuff that you might need. And they even have tips for effective searches right off the bat. So if you're having trouble, you can click that and they'll give you some information on how to get started. So all you have to do is make an account. It's free. You just make a login and a password. They also have what's called a wiki page, which is like a Wikipedia page, only it's for this specific company and website. And from this, you can search all these different areas. You have to have an account first to be able to search this. And again, this one also has jumpstart your research right over here so they can guide you through it if you need help. But if you want to just play around, you can select any of the locations. You click on North America, then you click on the state that you want, and then it breaks it down to the county level and so on and so forth. So I did Charlevoix County and left it kind of at that. And eventually you're going to land on like a Wikipedia looking page. And it just has tons of little links for sources of things. So all these little blue parts are links that are going to take you to another source where you might be able to find that information. So we have birth information, marriage information, death, divorce, so on and so forth. All these little links will take you in the right direction to try and find what you're looking for. I can say I honestly do not play around with these too much, but they are helpful when the time comes. Another free website is the US GenWeb project. And the US GenWeb project is all run by volunteers. So it's people just like you and me who like genealogy. But these people take a little bit more time out to update this website. And the good thing about this website is you're going to find somebody who is considered an expert for their area. So if we clicked on Michigan, for instance, it's going to break it down by county again. And then from county, you can click on one of the county's pages. So this is what Emmett County's page looks like. And one good thing about this is, like I said, there's somebody who kind of is the admin for this web page. So that person or those persons who are the admin for this Emmett County webpage are the people that you could contact if you had questions regarding ancestors in Emmett County, because you know that they live for this, because they're taking the time to update this website. And I kind of skipped a thing, but when you break it down by the state of Michigan, it's going to give you a county list, and the county list has names of the people who are kind of like the admins and the adoptive people of those counties. And I chose Emmett County because theirs looked really nice. And then moving on, another tip is sometimes you just have to go to the local places themselves. So I have family from Granger County, Tennessee, and I have found information on this website that I guarantee I would not find on Ancestry.com or Family Search. It's just, they did it themselves. It's buried down in their website, but they have a search feature and I found it. So I would recommend, if you have an ancestor in any area, like check to see if that area has a historical society or a great library or a genealogical society. See if they have a website, because if they do, you may find things on there that you're not going to find on the big player websites. And of course, so this Granger County Genealogy and History website, they are a part of the US Gen Web project, the previous one that I just showed you. So that means that somebody from the Gen Web project is probably keeping tabs on this as well, or vice versa. So they're talking with each other. So always look at the lower level websites for local communities. And finally, we'll talk about some free YouTube channels. So my favorite YouTube channel to help me out with Ancestry is Genealogy TV with Connie Knox. I feel like she has a great personality. She's always very helpful with everything. Her motto is helping you go further, faster, and factually with your family history research. And she uploads frequently. She has so many videos that are very, very helpful. Anything from understanding DNA to getting started on a family tree to helpful hints on websites like Ancestry, the secret hints on Ancestry.com if you have a paid membership. Tons of videos, and she uploads frequently.
What's her name, Trevor? Sorry.
Connie Knox. Yep. You can just type in Genealogy TV. Yep. On YouTube. Well, you can probably do it on Google too. But you know, some of the ones down here, new timeline features on Ancestry. This one says, "Oh my God, bingo!" It's probably like she found a new it says she found a new strategy for finding records. Things that are only on MyHeritage's website. How to conquer those brick walls when you have things that you just can't figure out the answer to. Free genealogy websites, which I actually watched before I did this. Even though I already was using them, but I watched it anyway. So another good one is Genealogy with Amy Johnson Crow. As you see right here, she just attended Roots Tech 2024, which is like the big ancestry, kind of like the Comic-Con of Ancestry. So she did a couple on what she found out that's new at Roots Tech, new things with different websites and different companies. Connie Knox also went to Roots Tech as well. One interesting thing that I saw on her web YouTube page not that long ago is how much artificial intelligence is making ancestry research easier. So the family search website that I mentioned earlier, they have used artificial intelligence now to really streamline searching for ancestors. And I used it a little bit one day, and I instantly got results. Like, I don't know the exact of how it's working, but basically the artificial intelligence is so good that it can pick out names like that through documents. So instead of having a document that somebody had to transcribe into like computer code, the AI is reading old cursive basically. So if the document has been scanned and we have like an old Revolutionary War letter with some kind of somewhat terrible cursive handwriting, the AI is getting good enough where it can pick out certain things from it and recognize it. So it's picking out surnames, it's picking out full names, it's picking out locations like, you know, Fort Detroit, for instance, anything like that. Another good YouTube webpage is Lisa Louise Cook's Genealogy Gems. I can honestly say I haven't used her as much, but she's always listed as one of the best ones on YouTube, one of the best genealogy ones on YouTube. And then another one that I've used somewhat frequently is Family History Fanatics. And the one that the reason I use them a lot is because trying to understand how DNA works and trying to understand how DNA is passed down, trying to understand how using DNA can help you with your research, or how to triangulate, as they call it, DNA, which is getting a little deep into things. But they have a lot of good videos on understanding DNA, but they also have videos that are just for general ancestry research as well. Just run all over the table with good videos. And with that, I have a few more things I'd like to say, and then we can open up for some questions. Like I said, I did not cover the federal census. However, the handout that I have, if you have it now or if you pick one up, the handout on the back of it, oh, you know what? Okay, scratch this, I take it back because these are different handouts. So, what's that? Yep, they're right here. The old handouts, I had an attachment to them that told you what every census has listed that you can find on it. But these ones don't have it because these ones are new ones. But it should be one of the links on there. But basically, there's a website that'll tell you what is listed on each census from like 1790 up to 1940, what you can find on it. And some words of advice that I have before we open up any questions and answers. If you're going to be doing genealogy, I would recommend that you be organized with your research, because if you're not organized, it's not worth doing. You're going to be all over the place. Document where you obtained your information. So if you print anything out or if you save anything to your computer, find some way to document digitally or write on the document if you print it up, right where you got it from. Because if you don't write where you got it from, you're going to probably end up forgetting, and then you're going to kick yourself because you don't know where you got it from. Because you might want to go back there at some point. Don't assume others' research is factual at face value. Find further documents to prove it is or isn't factual. Don't assume that records are factual. As we mentioned with the death certificates, people might have the wrong information and they just put it down. So don't assume records are factual. Information can change from one record to another, such as on the censuses. One census might say you were born in the United States. When you look at another one, it says, oh, they were born in Germany. And then the next one says, oh, they were born in the United States. And then you're like, well, which one is it? You know, so you got to find out what's right. And I would also say if you get stuck and hit a brick wall in your research, sometimes you just got to put it down for a little bit and move on to a different task, because it's no good just keep beating your head on the wall trying to find that one answer. Sometimes you just got to put it down, move on to a different ancestor. And with that, I'll say the museum is open July through Labor Day, Monday through Saturday from noon to 4. And if anybody wants to stop by for some assistance or to look around, please just give us a call ahead of time to let us know that you'll be coming. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions or any comments.
Have you used the Latter-day Saints? It's my understanding that they have genealogical research available in churches or whatever they call it.
I mean, I've never physically gone out there, but a lot of the big player websites kind of are connected to the Church of Latter-day Saints. I don't know if Family Search is particularly, but I believe they are. If you look down at the bottom of the, Perry says they are.
I was just there in
Yeah.
Salt City a couple months ago. And they're extremely helpful. You can walk in, got all these computer monitors everywhere. And someone helped me solve a brick wall that had stymied me for a long time.
Yeah.
So they're super helpful. And they were able to access both Family Search website.
I think they might kind of run Family Search, to be honest.
They do.
They own
Yeah.
Family Search. They sold
Yeah, they do.
Ancestry.
Yeah, but they also have access to everything on there.
But they have another computer program that they have their own information.
Hmm.
It's different.
It-
At the library out there.
Oh, at the library out there, which is probably the resource Perry was using when she was there then.
I just was using, they have a ton of volunteers who have different expertise.
Mhm.
And so they came to the monitors, but they weren't coming up with, I don't think it was proprietary to that location, but they did have rows and rows of microfilm. So maybe some of the research that was beyond what I was seeing had to do with the stuff they
I
owned
think
up
they have
there.
their own
Yeah, if they have their own internal, I have not been out there, but I know it seems like Family Search is like kind of their face to the public, I guess. And it's free, so that's good. But I don't know of any other sources from them. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending. I hope you have some success with your research.